So, as we said in the beginning, the focus of our third day is the list of high-value datasets and open data. It's my pleasure to welcome Martin Semberger from Austria, from the Federal Ministry of Economy, Anna Ludin. Please welcome. And we hope that we have in the line, I'm sitting here, please, Kubáň from the Czech Republic, and from the European Commission, Jiří Pilar. So I hope that Jirka is also with us. Jirka, are you listening to us? I'm not seeing him. Is the European Commission online? We had some difficulties with the line with Luxembourg in the morning. I hope in the meantime we have fixed the problem. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing Jirka, but maybe we can open the discussion with Martin. Martin, you are deeply involved in the discussion around high-value datasets. You have some initial insights. What's all about in the study that was performed by the consortium in Europe? Do we have a common ground in Europe for defining the high-value datasets?
Yes, thanks for the invitation, Pencho. Thanks for the question. Yes, indeed, high-value dataset. Actually, that was the idea in the Open Data Directive. How can we boost this whole data market? What is necessary in order to really give it an impetus? Because we've seen several regulatory changes during the years, and it didn't really work out, and so the intention was really to provide this booster. I'm happy that we had a broad consultation. There were experts involved. There is Deloitte and its team and many other partners who have developed a kind of common ground, indeed, I would say, in a study, which should provide us with the necessary steps how to proceed further. We still haven't seen the study itself, but we have been presented some results, actually, and I would say that sounds promising. The process is a good one. It's a decent set, actually, that has been identified, but, of course, there's always a question, is that enough for Europe, actually? For the beginning, I wanted to compare it maybe with this picture. We're kind of like engineers around a launch pad of a giant rocket. And actually, it's good. All those engineers are working that this rocket one day flies. But I think, speaking about these, the study actually contains two approaches, kind of a low-intensity or a high-intensity approach. And by the way, since we're gathering that many engineers and that many experts, I'm asking myself, well, why not go for the high-intensity approach when we're doing this anyway? But above all, we will see whether this rocket will fly one day and how we can give it a truly boost. First and foremost, it's also that the public, in this, regarding the Open Data Directive and high-value datasets, is of course it's up to the public sector. So it's the public sector that should be the role model, that should lead the way. And indeed, I hope that the whole process here and all the member states together will identify better now what is really necessary, and that we have to delve into this data economy, and that the public sector can really say, yes, we did something really good for Europe.
Many thanks. How do you comment the issue that, I mean, we have predefined lists, but in the meantime we have the pandemic, and as we know, the health data is not included in this list. What's your comment on this? Yeah.
Indeed, we have been observing this also in Austria and in Europe. It's a very challenging situation we're in, and actually I think that the citizens and the people out there have realized now more than ever that we need the data, that scientists need the data publicly available, and this is actually, on this example, we can see what we can do with all of this. We have actually also argued in this process, why not do more about health data? In particular, we see the European Center for Disease Control, in particular, all those statistics, and we're also so numbers oriented at this moment. And actually we see this lack of interoperability and standardization. It's so clearly evident that, but of course it needs some time. It would be good if we could also think this all together. Of course, the high-value datasets didn't include this from the onset, and it was actually clear during the negotiations also. In fact, when Austria was holding the presidency, we didn't even talk or think about data categories as such, because we wanted to leave it open to be technologically neutral. But in the end, we saw, and it was the later negotiators that decided on those common categories, and I think it's good to have it as a starter, as a first move. But during the years, during the next few months, I think we will also have to consider whether it's appropriate, maybe extending this high-value dataset list in the near future. But first and foremost, I think it's necessary to do the job well on these datasets. And I think let's give us a chance to do this correctly.
Many thanks, Martin. For some reasons, we did in Germany also our independent study commissioned by the Federal Ministry of Economy. It was also my pleasure to collaborate with Lina and Fraunhofer and all the other involved in that project. The study has not been published yet, but we have some initial results. What's the current picture in Germany? Could you say a bit more?
First of all, many thanks to you, Pencho, for inviting us and also for this excellent summit in these difficult times. It's not easy, and so congrats to your summit, first of all. And of course, high-value datasets is also an important topic in our German open data policy. And we wanted to get in, so the European study in a nutshell was a very broad exercise, and it took a long time also to do this very in-depth analysis and cost-benefit analysis on all these categories, and it involved many stakeholders. And we as Germany thought, okay, we know that in Germany the situation is even more complex maybe than in other member states because we have federalism. So we know that with the definition of high-value data sets, it's not only the federal level that is affected, but also, of course, data holders at Länder level and at communal level. So we wanted to understand better how is our situation now and what is actually to be done to be able in the discussions that we will have at European level to say, okay, in this field we know already that we have these data sets and that they are available or not, or we have legal problems at this point. And so we wanted to have an overview about these German problems, and I think we have had a beautiful study in a very, very short time frame, so it's not comparable to the European study. It also had a different scope, I would say, and the study will be published, so I have to ask for a bit more patience because we have to review the study, and I'm very happy also that the Commission recently, I'm sure they will say something about it, but relaxed a little bit the timeline for the implementing act. So we thought at the beginning when we commissioned the study that we would have only a couple of weeks, a couple of months to conduct really the study, and we would need very fast to have the results. But now we understand, okay, the Commission has accepted to go in more detail with some questions, with the member states. So we hope that these results of our studies can be beneficial to the discussion. It's one input, it's an independent input, and it will shed light on the difficult scope, I would say, in Germany on high-value data sets, because one major difficulty with the implementing act is, and I'm sure we will talk about this, is that in our understanding, and I think also in the Commission's understanding, the implementing act can only define data sets that are already available in the member states, because, of course, the Open Data and PSI Directive did not have the scope to actually regulate access rights, but rather to harmonize minimum standards of reuse conditions. And that's what the PSI Directive does, and that's how also basically this introduction of high-value data sets cannot be more than that. So it is essentially what you said, Pancho, about finding the common ground. And I think we have a good common ground because we have specific legislation in specific fields, such as INSPIRE regulation. I think in these fields we are very far already, and that helps a lot when we will now go further with PSI and defining high-value data sets.
Many thanks for your initial remarks. So now we're going to try to move to the Czech Republic. Unfortunately, Michal is supposed to be with us today, but because of the latest restriction, he had to cancel the trip yesterday. And we're really sorry for that. But I'm happy that I'm seeing you, Michal. Are you listening to us?
Yes, I am listening to you.
Perfect. It's perfect that the connection to the Czech Republic is functioning. Could you please maybe comment on the same issue? Do you, from your perspective, do we have a common ground in Europe when it comes to open data, and especially when it comes to the predefined list of high-value data sets?
Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be here with you and this European Data Summit. The position of the Czech Republic, I think all the member states and also the Czech Republic, they were doing extraordinary, big and huge job identifying data sets, and with the work with the European Commissions, I think we find the basic common grounds, because we were aware that there's many areas and categories which collects high-value datasets, and these datasets might be identified. I also consider the role of the national stakeholders, all the national agencies in each member state, very important, because together with them we could provide really huge list of suggestions to be on the list for HVDS list, and that's for the all member states really huge common ground. But from the position of the Czech Republic, we see really important that's not only the list itself will provide the HVDS, the high-value datasets, but also we have to find a common ground in the level of technical specifications, because we need to provide also the information to the user concerning the list of technical attributes and technical documentation, in order to give them the guidelines how to make the open data more interoperable. And this will be, I think, also provided by my colleague Jakub Klimek and this afternoon. So we have so much in common concerning the common grounds, but let's see to what extent we will go to the details concerning the level of the datasets. I was following all the meetings of the European Commission and Open Data Committee. We haven't seen the list yet. I would say that it seems promising to me, but once we will get a list, I think the real discussions about the important elements such as personal data, technical quality, INSPIRE data, different standards, different categories will be discussed on this topic.
Many thanks. Do you consider the list enough ambitious when it comes to the current crisis? The same question to Martin. We don't have health data included.
That's actually good questions. I think as during the negotiation with the Commission from the Czech Republic, we also come up with different categories, but we have been told that it's not on a day list. And since, as I mentioned before, there's all the member states put so much effort on a national level to identify the datasets, so we can do better. I would be more optimistic, and the list could be expanded, but in a way that's what is not on the list. The leftovers, which in the end they won't get to the list, they might be discussed also with the member states, and on some voluntary agreement can be also published, which would be a good idea, and also to promote some kind of like international cooperation on this level. So I would say that's as we can do better. And as for the data regarding COVID-19 and coronavirus, we also support the position of Austria, which suggesting that this data should be also on the list on HVDS. And I think during the final workshop of HVDS provided by the Deloitte, the contractor of the European Commission, that was not clearly mentioned, but I'm not sure if I'm not remember quite well. So this could be also on the list.
Many thanks. I was on the line with Luxembourg. We definitely have problem with them, but let us try. Jirka, are you listening to us maybe? Or Szymon Lewandowski? We'll have a second try later because they are also involved in the second session, and now we continue without them, unfortunately. And we hope that in the meantime they're going to fix the problem. The second group of question is in regard privacy, Martin. We talk about some data sets, especially we know on the list we have the issue with corporate ownership, and there are many aspects involving personal data. How do you comment this issue? How this issue will be solved in the list?
Exactly. I think from the comments we've heard before, actually, there are actually two elements, I would say. There's the technical and legal level, and then there is the political decision-making. That's also quite very important to not forget about this. Apart from everything we're debating here, what will we, the decision-makers, do in the end? And what we will dare to do, actually. And this is actually what Commissioner Breton also mentioned. We need to do more, actually. That's actually what I've heard from his message, or from what Eline has said. Yeah. Coming back to these technical and legal aspects, we in Austria have actually identified, of course, the GDPR is like the mother of any decisions in the data sphere. So is actually the Open Data Directive also with regard to the public sector. It's another very essential element. Then, of course, one could argue actually that all data sets are kind of do have some relationship, some personal data contained, or we know all that through different techniques there might be personal data that could be extracted from this data. But of course, we might not be aware of that too much, but it's always the discussion of kind of, does the GDPR hamper our developments in this regard? So our position is actually that we need to take that into account. We need to be very correct on this. So and there is in particular in one data category, speaking about company and company ownership, of course, this list actually definitely touches upon personal data sets as well. And in the study, actually, this is clearly identified. There is a separation, as we have to do, according to the GDPR, what is personal, what is non-personal. But there is also one major aspect, and that's called transparency, actually. So, and here again comes the political effect, kind of, and the different cultures in Europe actually show us that there are different data protection cultures from Northern Europe to Southern Europe. And so it might be absolutely a no-go in Germany or in Austria to publish certain company data or ownership data, while in Finland or Sweden that's completely normal. So what do we do with this situation? We're talking here about a European directive and a common data space. So actually it's also a kind of very fascinating standardization effort we're talking here about. So our position is actually, let's be very careful about this, and in particular in this data category, we favor an ex-ante data protection impact assessment, or also the European Data Protection Supervisor could at least give some input, because if we end up in the situation that in the end, when we define those data sets, this will lead to kind of different interpretations and struggles and I don't know what, that might not be a good way. So it is actually the moment to say that we need to do this properly at European level, because this will also solve, it's also a question of efficiency and pragmatism, because leaving this all to the member states or to the data holders themselves to decide is in our view not really sufficient. We should do the utmost to specify, to clarify what is necessary at European level in order to create this level playing field.
So basically you would like to have an assessment before defining the list, but having in mind the time, do you think that the time is sufficient till beginning of?
Yeah, you know, personally also we want to have this rocket flying, of course. But in the end, it's also a question kind of, are we doing this correctly? Should we have done more in this process? And actually, the Austrian presidency, it was also the whole decision about having this implementing act was a decision made also by the council to give the experts to have a say, also to the member states. And you were speaking about the common ground. For us, during the presidency, then, those days actually, it was very elementary to say, it's not Brussels that's saying something, but it's us together who define those data sets. It's us, the European Union and the member states and the European Parliament who decide on this. So let's talk about this, and in the end, we will be confident that this will work. Yeah, but for the moment, of course, you could also endanger the whole process if you kind of lengthen the process and you have many obstacles and different arguments. At some point in time, of course, you have to make a decision. But in this very special moment, it's our view that actually, yes, let's have a careful look at this. Maybe there are some data protection assessments we need to do at European level that would simply add to further clarity. We just want to avoid those diverging interpretations in the end. But we all know that we have to go this way and that we have to act fast, actually. But let's do it correctly.
Listening to you, I have the feeling there is obvious different consideration of GDPR in the member states when it comes to this issue. Anna, do we have the same worries in Germany when it comes to this category, company and company ownership?
Of course, we have different voices, but we have concerns in many fields about personal data that could be involved in these categories, namely in the category of company ownership, but also in the geospatial field because of cadastral data registers where we hear concerns about the involvement of personal information, but the main issue is, as Martin already explained, is the diverging interpretations not only between member states but also within a member state, and so we need a clear understanding of what we see as personal information and where we can think of open data that is politically more important to open up.
So maybe the title is promising too much.
The title of the directive?
No, the title of company ownership putting on this list.
I don't know. There will be There will be definitely some information that is already available and that can be easily be available in better conditions, basically, because you have, of course, already also European regulation on specific information of these company registers that has to be published. So basically, the question is, what do we define in the list? There will definitely be some features of the company registers that are not as problematic as other features. But also maybe what I understood also through our study we had, because I'm definitely not a data protection expert, that the problem in data protection and PSI is more complex, especially in regards to the company registers, because one might think that, okay, everyone can have a look into the company register, so you can get information out of it. So what is really the problem here with data protection? But the problem they see is really when you open up the whole register, and you could basically have the whole register with one click through the API, then basically you can profile, you can do profiling through the whole register, and that's a whole different data protection problem. That's what I understood out of our study as well, and that this is another basically legal question than we already have with information you can get out of company registers. And with regards to cadastral registers, I'm not familiar with the details, but it was a bit of a disappointment to realize that, of course, even in this cadastral information spectrum, you have different views on if this is personal information or not. It is a disappointment because we need a clear understanding and to be able to define it as high-value data set, and in the end to open it up cost-free, machine-readable, and with an API.
Many thanks for your clarification. Michael, do you share the same concerns that maybe the different perception or assessment of the GDPR may affect certain categories of high-value data sets in Europe?
Well, I think that concerning the personal data and its role within HVDS, it's really crucial and important, and the contractor and commission could do more concerning the data protection impact assessments. So each datasets, I think it was also discussed on the meetings with the European Commission and the member states, that each dataset should have some guidelines and the rules how to deal with the personal data. And as for the Czech Republic, I must say that the Czech company register is open. You can easily find the name of the owner of the company and its address, and these data are machine readable and you can download them. It's also because of the transparency and accountability, because then you can find the links and shifts and connection with the ownership who receive the state subsidies, and so it's the accountability and transparency play a big role. But I think we have to differentiate between two things. The first thing is data processing on the side of public sector body, which is basically the publication of the data sets, and data processing which is conducted by the third party, which is the user. And these purposes are different. The publication, the provider basically is raising the data, but the reuser have different purposes with the data, and that's important because we have to focus on the third party and as a reuser, which basically starts with the data, and his work has to be fully in compliance with the GDPR, and it's not only about the publishing the data from the perspective of the institutions, but also we have to focus on the role of the user, which has basically only one interest, or how to measure it and its legitimate interest, and which is basically only one legal ground for reusing of the data. And so for us, in our opinion, the debate should focus on the secondary use and its legality, applicability, possibility in general, and not so much on the publication, on the act of itself publication of the datasets, and which we don't see as problematic as the reuse of the dataset with the present data, and we should focus on this part of the entire process.
Many thanks, Michal. Would you like to add something,
Yes,
Martin?
maybe if you could briefly add something. I somehow have the impression that we're talking about different truths, kind of, because there is one truth, of course, kind of as a very data privacy aware gentleman, I would say, no way that personal data is being shared. And of course, the public sector is carefully watching this. On the other hand, we have registers and we have people that can easily access all this information. This information is there, but is not out there and it's not accessible. And from yesterday's debates, actually, I could also see that for the sake of transparency and business interaction, actually, many people are favoring that this data actually should be publicly available because it increases our daily lives, the quality of our daily lives, of our daily business lives. So here we can clearly see it's more than just data. It's all that is linked to the way we act based upon these informations that make our lives better then.
Many thanks. So let's open maybe one of the most difficult issue, at least when from German perspective in the discussion, as the issue when it comes to the adverse effect on competition. What does the list of high-value datasets changes in this regard, and what can we expect? You have some initial insights in the study. Can we expect something, especially? There was a lot of criticism when it comes to transport data. What's the problem around that? Who would like to start? Maybe Anna this time.
Well, the problem you're talking about is not really, I would say, a PSI, high-value dataset specific problem, because that's a question in general on the Open Data and PSI Directive. Because the recast has, for the first time now, extended the scope to public undertakings in specific areas. And of course, some argue that this would lead maybe in specific fields to competition distortion, maybe if in the end public undertakings would have to comply with the rules of the PSI Directive, and private undertakings that are not affected by the PSI Directives could continue to handle the data in other ways to have exclusive contracts, etc. So that's maybe the discussion you are pointing at, but I don't think that is relevant for the high-value datasets as much as for the directive itself.
So you don't expect any changes even after implementing the list in January?
Changes? No.
When it comes to transport data in...
No, so the field of mobility, as we know from the Commission, will be very restrictive, but that's not due to this problem. It's rather due to the conflict with the ITS regulation. So the ITS regulation has already very clearly and very specifically regulated access to certain mobility data, so that the Commission doesn't see very much of a scope to define high-value data sets in the field of mobility. But that's I would say, rather a question of conflicts between two regulations, one directive and the ITS directive, rather than a problem of what you were aiming at.
Maybe you remember we had the workshop in February this year with the representative of European Commission, and at that point they said they can hardly believe that some data sets from the public undertakings will be in the category of high-value data sets. And it was a kind of big disappointment of many participants at that time, I remember. But
it's an interesting question. It remains to be seen what we will in the end define in the list. But it is in fact something, as much as in the European study as in our German study now, I didn't see so many data sets that would actually affect public undertakings, at least in Germany. That's That's the first observation I can say about this. Yeah.
What's the first observation in Austria, Martin, and then we continue to Michael?
I would say it doesn't have to be that public undertakings are not affected. Actually, you have to remember that the whole idea was actually to also include public undertakings to kind of have the broad spectrum of the public sector covered. So, and from a Commission perspective, I cannot speak for the Commission now, but it was actually clear that we need to have an effective instrument regardless of the structural setup in different member states. There could be a company in Austria, well, I would say there could be a transport-related sector which is kind of structured as a public undertaking in Austria, while it is a state-owned business in another member state. So regardless of this, it only depends upon the idea of what do we define and what do we want from this sector.
But I mean, this issue is really mentioned quite frequently. Do you see any potential risk of adverse effect on competition when it comes to the list?
I think that we have carefully been considering this, and in order to evade any competition aspect that could happen at all. Actually, I also wanted to add, with regard to the ITS, we're talking about different boosters to the data market. So actually, high-value datasets is a booster, and actually the ITS directive is also not in contradiction to the PSI directive. It's another booster. So, and actually, it was not that we did not define mobility datasets as high-value datasets because of the PSI directive, but because the ITS directive and the mobility sector is already very advanced in this field. So in the end, the product or the result will be the same. So if something is happening there, you don't need to act there. With regard to competition, I would say we did not really see that many competition issues, but again, it's the mobility sector in Austria. We are aware, of course, we have private railway companies and state-owned railway companies. And when you say you put up obligations on state-owned transport companies, does this hamper the competition of private partners? But here in this regard, we are hearing actually from the private sector, there should be a level playing field. So if somebody has to share, if the public sector has to share data, then actually, at least in this sector, it would also be fair to say that the private sector should also contribute some data. And I think this is now the moment also for the Commission to decide how to delve into this business to government sharing, in particular in this mobility area, maybe, in order to that we don't have any distortions in this field. But sorry, Anna.
No, just about ITS again and mobility sector, maybe to clarify, there would be a little delta, I would say, if we would go into the mobility category with more ambition, because as far as I'm informed, the ITS directive and its implementing or delegated acts, they are not as specific when it comes to cost-free availability, and also when it comes to the dynamic data. It is left to the member states to decide if, I don't know, it is opened up to the conditions of ITS regulation. So there would be a field where PSI could do more. But it was basically so far, I would say, a decision of the Commission to leave it out of our discussion for now, because it's too complex, because there have been a lot of discussions going on within the ITS negotiations, basically, that were very difficult. Maybe also just one more comment on because you were talking earlier about health data and how we could maybe add another category. Well, this is an option we have in the PSI directive, we would need a delegated act. So it's also a complicated action if we wanted to add another category. But it's an option that is existing in the directive. And maybe to give a little bit of insight into our PSI group and how it works, I think all us representing the member states there in the group, we are very ambitious when it comes to open data. And so when the directive was done, basically, and we knew that the next exercise would be the implementing act, everyone was really ambitious and wanted the implementing act to be a fast exercise. And basically now we are at a point where we see all these problems in detail when it comes to data protection, etc., that we still have open questions that have not been addressed by the Commission, and member states have still questions. How are we going to deal with it? So that's been a reason why we and some member states were basically asking, so how are we going to continue? I think we need more time. And I think both studies, the German study but also the European studies, have shown that there is much more to talk about, and so the exercise of defining high-value data sets is a tricky one.
Many thanks, Anna, for the clarifications. Micha, what is the approach on public undertakings in the Czech Republic, and do you share the concerns when it comes to adverse effect on competition, please?
Yeah, well, I must say that once the state government organization or public body owns the public undertakings for 100%, you can apply the request according to Freedom of Information Act, so data should be published. And I don't see many issues regarding the competitiveness, although these questions are very frequently raised up during the negotiation process in the Czech Parliament, and it will be discussed during the entire process. But once the public undertaking is covered by the state money, it should be also published. And well, yeah, that's from my side.
Maybe we have questions from the audience. I see over there Walter. I see Thomas. Maybe we collect.
Hello, a quick remark since Martin mentioned the data situation and COVID, and in Austria it showed like how important data is. So we have a situation where we're roughly losing 5% of the GDP because of Corona, and since 221 days you have a miserable data situation when it comes to Corona in Austria. And the same thing happens here like with transportation data. We're like talking for years, like do we have like scheduled data, and it's not gonna happening. We had it before, it will be coming up with like the new PSI directive, then in the PSI directive was like on the high value data sets, and now we're moving from the high value data sets over to the ITS. And I know it's difficult, but I think if you wanna have like a European common data market or economy, we should be at least a little bit more ambitious. I mean, it's at least a little bit. It's not much we're asking for, it's decades. And when we're talking about building like this platform, launching a rocket, this is right now out in the open water, swimming on a wood, and it will not be launching. That's it. If this is the ambition, there will be no rocket launched. We're going with open data anywhere. So that's like really trying to encourage everybody, get some data out of it when we're trying to be like a digital economy, or like trying to be compete with like China or the US. And again, this is like we talk about transportation data, where public tax money goes into it for providing that service. And the list goes on like that. And like with Corona, I mean, this like in Austria, it's nuts. You don't get the data, and the ministry is basically like today releasing another data set which is not compatible with the data sets from before. So this is like a whole structural process we're still dealing 2020. And I think this should be addressed. Thank you.
Strong words, many thanks, Walter. Before we do some strict Corona rules, maybe some of you would like to comment on this remark of Walter. Maybe Austria was mentioned.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. Yeah, that was actually a very important remark. Actually, I am also a fan of speaking frankly about the situation. And actually, yeah, I don't want to kind of polish the situation and say everything is super rosy and we're going to be fantastic. It's hard work, actually. But for the moment, I can say, yes, we are working on this. This is exactly why we are doing those high-value data sets. And I might also say there is a silver lining on the horizon also, because in the Council conclusions on the European data strategy, I think I have spotted that the member states are willing to prioritize the creation of a European health data space as one of the first priorities. So I think everybody has realized that something needs to be done with regard to COVID-19 and enhancing data transparency. But in particular, I cannot speak for the health sector now, but in my view, it's one of those areas that's not a really community area, that's not so much within the competence of the European Union. So we should also be talking about how to include the health sector into all these developments, at least in the data sphere.
Many thanks. We continue with the second question from Thomas Turšič.
Okay, it's pointed in the same direction. So the study and you pointed out that we have two problems in Germany with transparency and transport. So we have a traffic light system in the studies. In both areas, they switch to red one. So you say, or the study both say the law should be made in the Germany and the part not in the EU one, but downgraded to the local area. So Germany should say which transport data set should be opened or not. You said it's too complicated in Germany. So you say complicated. The directive, or the many directives of the EU, they deal with the transport data. So we should not say the EU should define what data we provide. English, okay. Okay, new one, new try. Okay, the high-value data sets should define the data sets for Europe, the value one. And Germany said, please no, exclude the transport data. And the law should be made by Scheuer. So I know that will not be. So the transport and the transparency data will dead in Germany. So it's my opinion.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just trying to clarify what has been said. So in the category of mobility, we didn't have any kind of formal position so far on high-value data sets at all. No member state had any position on any kind of data set that should be put on the list or not, because the discussion has not even started at European level. We're before this date. So there have been studies that have been commissioned by the European Union and by us, the European Commission, sorry, and us, to understand the complexity, but we're not at the point to discuss with the Commission now on the content of the implementing act, meaning the list of high-value data sets. So we, as Germany, have not had any positioning on the question, how should we look at mobility data, for example. So in this process of high-value data sets, we have not had this position you were talking about. And so it's rather what I was describing before was an approach from the Commission towards their study authors to say, in the field of mobility, don't go into much detail because there is a conflict with ITS directive and delegated acts, and we have done already much, how you said it, with ITS, so we don't need to look into more detail in the mobility sector. That was basically the Commission's position. That's not the German position you were talking about.
Argue to say we want to exclude this from the open data mindset. So it's my fear that it will happen. So we exclude data and not to think about what's the best practice to get this data. So we only say, okay, we have problems, but not we have solutions for that. So
maybe we have to stick to the time. Maybe your last remarks. Maybe we start with Michael. And could you tell us maybe what's the situation? Does a heavier financial and organizational burden on data holders constitute a justification for not declaring certain data sets as high-value data sets? And maybe combine this with your final remarks, Michael, if you could, please.
Since we are collecting the information from all national stakeholders regarding the 6 categories of HVDS datasets, already during the negotiations the last year, we come across several technical and financial obstacles concerning the updating and preparation of the IT system in order to make the data published. But we believe this financial and technical problems can be solved with either financial support from the side of the European Commission. It may be the part of the Digital Europe program. It can also be solved during the other projects or financial support from the European Commission. But also these technical obstacles can be solved during the regular maintenance and updating IT systems, because once you have the IT system in your public administration body and is more than 4 and 5 years old, it should be updated, and we should count with the data. We also discussed the numbers and what the impact of the putting the datasets on the list of HVDS on the list and its impact on the national budget. And there was some agreement with the Czech Meteorological Institute that this will be the part of the discussions, but we need to have the final list, which we can see, and to set up and create our formal positions towards the European Commission in order to start the discussions. Because I can see this meeting, this summit as part of the preliminary discussions, but we are still in the phase of waiting for the final list in order to start. Then with the list we can start to really negotiate with the Commission and with the other member states. And that's also the point. As for my personal perspective, I would say that we should focus at the end on the user, to make data the kind of user-oriented, to give him the guidelines, because we are putting so much effort to make the data public, and we were really expecting a lot from the previous PSI directive. We are expecting a lot, and we are expecting a lot from Open Data Directive. And I believe that all my colleagues and from the Open Data Committee and from the Commission, we are expecting a lot from list of HVDS, and we should take it as an opportunity to do it very, very well, and to reach interoperability in order to fulfill the aims of digital single market. Because as you said, the data from the mobility from all these 6 categories has really huge value, and it should be the part of the European digital economy.
Many thanks, Michael. The same question to Martin, and then we close with Anna the session.
I would say great expectations everybody has on this directive. Actually, I also fully understand that somebody would like to have it as a eierlegende Wollmilchsau, we say in German, kind of one directive that kind of solves everything. But with regard to those high-value data sets, we actually see that we are interfering in different sectors. And this is actually also visible now with those data spaces, sectoral approaches. So I just hope for your patience or understanding also that some solutions are better done at sectoral level, and the general bar, the general level is being regulated in the Open Data Directive, and will also be contained in future high-value data sets, maybe one day we see. With regard to my great expectations, of course, I would love to see this common process to be a very fruitful process, and we already see that we are creating a lot of standardization across the European Union, a lot of harmonization through this process. Therefore, it's extremely important to have also the Czech position stipulating actually what is necessary to reach a good common ground, a good level in the European Union. And I hope that in the end we'll reach a very good result.
And with regard to the financial burden, should it play any role, or
yes.
Does it play any role?
Almost forgot the most important part. Yeah, I think the financial part is solvable. Yeah, but we need to make those decisions, and of course, when we know the direction.
Sorry to interrupt you. So it means if one certain body is missing 500,000 euros
yes.
in a year.
That's also from the sustainability agenda. I would say we shall not leave them alone. We must not leave them alone. But in this case, when we say that we want to have those data sets, for example, in the geographic arena, then the state, we should actually also look after ways and means and how to compensate this. And I also hope for the European Union to be ready and willing to give support for this very important digital transformation.
Many thanks, Martin. Anna, the same final remarks.
Yeah, thank you. So high value within the directive refers to the potential we attribute to the reuse of the data. So that is, of course, important when we think about what data set should be a high value data set. And so we should consider the value that comes from the reuse potential, the socio-economic benefits we could have when opening up these data, cost-free, machine-readable, and in real time. But of course, it's an equation, and of course, you cannot leave out the equation completely, the costs that will occur. But it's of course a minor. It shouldn't be the only thing to look at, because the benefits are, of course, the most important the most important feature or requirement we have to assess. But it's also difficult to assess it, as always in open data, if you don't know what will come out of opening up a certain data set. So it's a complicated assessment.
Many thanks, Anna. Unfortunately, we couldn't make the call with Luxembourg, but we learned from Michael that also the European Commission provides support in this regard, and it's really a good message, I believe. Many thanks. We continue in 5 minutes. We have to clean the microphones, and then we continue with Victoria Bock from the Technologie Stiftung.